This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Western Bekaa, armed troops and security forces raided a number of houses in the town of Gaza and arrested 3 suspects of Syrian nationality. Meanwhile, a raid operation in Barilyas led to the arrest of 3 suspects, a Saudi and 2 Syrians, who admitted to planning to undertake several terrorist operations. Lebanese troops discovered 3 vehicles rigged with explosives during a raid on a hideout in East Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. 2 Mercedes cars and a Volkswagen van were discovered near the town of Barilyas. Experts found 3 Katyusha rockets set in one of the Mercedes cars, while wires and other equipment were found in the other Mercedes and the van. The raid operation comes a day after security forces arrested 3 suspects, 2 Syrians and a Saudi, near Barilyas, about 10 kilometers from the main border crossing to Syria. The Saudi is called Fahd bin Abdulaziz al-Mughamis and nicknamed Abu Ja'far al-Tayyar. He is linked to Abu Hamza al-Muhajir in Iraq. The Syrians are Ahmad Muhammad Usayli and Muhammad Abdurrahim. Security forces found weapons, explosives, detailed maps of villages and cities, and night vision goggles in their hideout. Security sources revealed that the 3 testified to rigging the unregistered vehicles with explosives. Meanwhile, sources revealed that security forces in the Western Bekaa caught a Syrian man with Lebanese nationality in the Lebanese town of Gaza. After raiding his house, it was found that the man, Abdullah Barakat, hid bombs and other military equipment. He is believed to be connected with a radical Syrian leader by the name of Ahmad Tawil, nicknamed Sheikh Abu Srat.
Covering the confrontations between Al-Qaeda and Al-Jaysh al-Islami, or the Islamic Army, our cameras went into the battlefield in the area of Al-Iraqiya, west of Baghdad. The images show the destruction of the city and the presence of members from the Islamic Army, while people are trying to resume their normal lives after a period of relative calm. Majid Hamid reports.
Although it looks like a ghost town, this area used to be well known in Baghdad as a place of flourishing commerce and as a thriving marketplace. Clashes between armed groups in Al-Iraqiya, west of Baghdad, have changed the face of this city. The Islamic Army, which is one of the factions of the Iraqi resistance, announced a war against Al-Qaeda in Iraq, or what has become known as the Islamic State. This fighting between people who were friends yesterday but are enemies today has been justified by leaders in the Islamic Army as a response to Al-Qaeda's killing and kidnapping of Islamic Army leaders in Baghdad.
The reason we are fighting Al-Qaeda is to end the oppression of our brothers and the tyranny of Al-Qaeda on this land.
الجيش الإسلامي نشر العشرات من المقاتلين في الجهة الشمالية.
The Islamic Army deployed dozens of fighters in the northern area of the city, which is under their control and which has witnessed intermittent confrontations between the 2 rival parties using light weapons. The west of Al-Iraqiya is still under the control of Al-Qaeda, but the eastern part is relatively calm, permitting the inhabitants to go out to buy food and fetch water, which had been cut off throughout the area. Destruction and ruin are readily visible in the city due to the various armed activities.
Only God can end it. Where are our sons? Tell me, where are they? Other than in prisons or beheaded and disposed of.
Al-Iraqiya is considered to be one of Baghdad's hotspots since the occupation, with continuous clashes taking place in plain view of the American and Iraqi troops, which seem to have allowed the Islamic Army to operate and fight Al-Qaeda. This, despite the fact that the Islamic Army is one of Baghdad's most zealous armed groups in its targeting of U.S. troops who might be adhering to the proverb, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." Majid Hamid, Al-Arabiya, Baghdad.
With us now is Majid Hamid in Baghdad. Majid, these images are being broadcast for the first time. But what is the background to the battle between the Islamic Army and Al-Qaeda? And does it extend to other cities and areas in Baghdad?
نعم حول وتحديدا حول رسالة الدكتور النعيمي علي النعيمي المتحدث باسم
Yes, Dr. Naimi, spokesman for the Islamic Army, said that the fighting between Al-Qaeda and the Islamic Army came after the Islamic State, which includes Al-Qaeda, killed and kidnapped a number of Islamic Army leaders in the area of At-Ta'miriya, Al-Amiriya and other places in Anbar district. Several armed groups had previously engaged in dialogue with the Islamic State after fighting took place between the Islamic Army, the Thawrat al-Ishrin brigades and Al-Qaeda, but these negotiations failed. Al-Amiriya yesterday was indeed a ghost town, and we were only able to reach limited sections which are under the control of the Islamic Army, but we were unable to reach the other areas where the clashes were coming from, and which were under the control of the Islamic State, and where United States troops also led some battles. The speaker, Abu Zayed, who was interviewed in that area, said that the fighting will continue. He also made an important point, which is that the formation of a council to save Baghdad, supported by the tribes, is necessary. Without a doubt, the kidnapping of the 5 British nationals in Iraq is one of Britain's biggest crises there. The 5 British nationals were kidnapped in the middle of the day by armed men wearing official military uniforms. Britain is concerned that the kidnappers have political demands.
Nothing is left of this building except for these destroyed walls. The destruction was caused this time by intensive aerial bombardments on the Shiite city of El Sadr. One of the city's residents says that the destruction of his home was caused by an American military vehicle. The American forces said that they were searching several homes in the city.
They came in their car and launched the attack. I was asleep in here. They started knocking on the door screaming, "Get up!" So I went to talk to them, but they destroyed the building and caused it to collapse. They told us that they wanted us to tell them where the 4 British were. We told them that we did not know.
This Iraqi citizen has found what was left of an explosive device used by the Americans to open residents' homes. They said that the American forces never hesitated to use force against them. According to the residents, 9 Iraqis were detained and 2 others were killed. The American forces did not comment on this subject matter.
The British ambassador in Baghdad, Dominic Asquith, called on the kidnappers of the 5 British hostages to release them. In a press conference he held today in Baghdad, Asquith stressed that his country is doing the best it can to assure the release of the 5 British hostages.
أشعر بقلق كبير حيال هؤلاء الرجال الخمسة كما إن
I am deeply concerned about those 5 men and their families. I'm very worried that we have not heard any more news from them, and I ask their kidnappers to release them so that they can return to their families. I am very worried that we have not heard any more news of them, and I ask the kidnappers to release them so that they can return to their families. The British government's policy in these cases is clear and well known. We do not tolerate actions of this sort. We are working seriously towards the release of those men, and we will do all we can to help reunite them with their families. We have people here in Iraq that are waiting to hear from anybody who's willing to speak about the incident, and even from the kidnappers themselves, if they wish to contact us.
We start with the latest situation in Iraq, where at least 49 people have been killed and more than 40 others wounded in separate attacks across the country. The deadliest attack took place when 2 car bombs went off in quick succession, killing 15 people and wounding 32 others in the southern town of Qurna. Separately, gunmen attacked the home of a police chief in Baquba, killing 14 people and kidnapping his 4 children. During the attack, rocket-propelled grenades were fired before gunmen stormed the house. Also in Baquba, a roadside bomb killed 2 high-ranking police officers. Elsewhere in the country, a car bomb exploded outside a mosque near the northern city of Kirkuk just after Friday prayers, killing 10 people and wounding 10 others. Meanwhile, U.S. and Iraqi soldiers killed 1 suspected insurgent and detained 12 others in raids targeting Al-Qaeda in the western Anbar province.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. هل ستكون محادثات قمة الدول
Will talks in the G8 summit in Germany help widen or narrow the political gap among the world's leading nations? What is the position of the United States President George W. Bush on the global warming declaration that was endorsed by the vast majority of the G8 nations? Why did Bush reject a proposal submitted by German Chancellor Angela Merkel to empower the United Nations to lead efforts in the fight against greenhouse emissions? Can the G8 summit diffuse international fear that a second Cold War is about to start as the United States moves closer to establishing a missile defense shield in Eastern Europe? What is the likely outcome of the Bush-Putin talks in the G8 summit? What are the G8 plans to combat world poverty and international economic crises? When will the superpower nations stop lecturing poor countries and instead launch investment programs and implement serious strategies to help develop the economies of the South?
تنهض باقتصادات دول الجنوب.
مع تواصل أعمال قمة الدول الثمان الكبرى في منتجع هايليغندام شمال شرق ألمانيا، تبدو الملفات المطروحة أكبر بكثير من أن تحسم وسط تناقضات المواقف وغياب الحلول والرؤى المشتركة.
The group of 8 nations continues talks in the resort city of Heiligendamm in the northeast of Germany amidst fear that the controversial issues facing it are far too complicated to be resolved during this annual session. Some of the topics discussed in the G8 summit include missile defense shields, global warming, and the decline of international growth, as well as world poverty and the Middle East problem. However, the showdown between Washington and Moscow over the proposed US missile defense shield in Eastern Europe overshadowed talks in the G8 summit. Russian President Vladimir Putin warned that his country would use Russian-made ballistic missiles to hit targets in Europe if the US goes ahead with its plan. In another development, the US President George W. Bush rejected a proposal by German Chancellor Angela Merkel to empower the UN to implement a strategy that would help resolve the issues of global warming and reduce the emission of greenhouse gases. Bush, who wants his country to lead international efforts in the German-sponsored plan, said that his administration refuses to abide by certain policies. Bush fears that such a reduction of greenhouse gases could reflect negatively on his country's economic rate of growth. The rich countries are facing mounting pressure and sharp criticism for failing to implement articles of the Millennium Agreement, in which leading nations were urged to combat poverty and help shrink the gap between the North and the South. Meanwhile, more than 500,000 protesters gathered in and around the resort city of Heiligendamm, where they urged the G8 leaders to stop making half-hearted promises to poor countries and instead take some serious measures to help develop the economies of the South. In addition, they urged the G8 nations to stop exporting globalization in the form of imperialism and colonization at the expense of poor nations' cultures.
عملية لتطوير اقتصاديات هذه الدول بدلا من تصدير العولمة بعناوينها الإمبريالية والاستعمارية وثقافة إلغاء الآخر.
The president of the Kurdish region of Iraq, Masoud Barzani, refused the Turkish preconditions for holding negotiations with Iraqi Kurds about clashes between Turkey and the Kurdistan Workers' Party. Barzani said that if Ankar's objective is war, then he will not be in support of it.
The Turkish forces did not enter the Kurdish region of Iraq. If Turkey were to act on its threat, then that would be in violation of both Iraq's sovereignty and the Kurdish region's sovereignty. We reiterated on several occasions that that we will exert all our effort to help Turkey if it chooses a peaceful solution. However, we can't accept the Turkish condition demanding to confront the Kurdish Labour Party.
The Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that any Turkish military operation outside Turkey first needs to be approved by the parliament. This comes as the army decided to place 3 Turkish states under its control for 3 months, effective immediately. The decision was made based on the clashes between the Turkish army and the Kurdistan Workers' Party.
The army put the states of Sirt, Shirnak, and Akkari under its direct control effective June 2nd until June 9th. The army has banned civilians from these states from reaching mountainous areas. This comes in the context of the ongoing military operations against the Kurdistan Workers' Party inside Turkey and along the Turkish-Iraqi borders. It seems that these military operations were intended to pave the way for what the Turkish Army Chief of Staff has been demanding, which is a military operation inside the Iraqi territories.
The government should immediately respond to the demands of the Army's Chief of Staff. The government should not wait for Washington. We have to enter northern Iraq to get rid of the Kurdistan Workers' Party soldiers because they have been killing our citizens and soldiers. They have been violating our sovereignty every day, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
Turkey has amassed its military along the Iraqi borders, but only the Turkish parliament can make the decision to deploy Turkish troops outside of the country. The army's chief of staff, Yashar Bok, must first submit a written request to the parliament. Bok, however, refuses to do so.
The Army Chief of Staff has announced his demands and explained the importance of carrying out a military operation in northern Iraq. The government must make a political decision to do this. A parliament session must be held immediately to make a decision.
رئيس الوزراء التركي رجب طيب أردوغان أكد ضرورة صدور قرار من البرلمان لشن عملية.
The Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan reiterated that the parliament must first approve launching a military operation outside Turkey's borders. He said that appropriate measures will be taken to ensure that the Turkish army will not enter the borders areas which have been surveyed by helicopters. Turkey has amassed its troops along the Iraqi borders, but the decision to carry out a military operation against the Kurdistan Workers' Party outside Turkey must first be approved by the parliament and by Prime Minister Erdogan. Mohammed Abbasi, Al-Alam, Ankara.
Mohammed Al-Abbasi, Al-Alam, Ankara.
3 Turkish soldiers were killed and 3 others were injured when their patrol unit was attacked by an explosive device in southeastern Anatolia. According to security forces, the explosive device went off from a distance as a military vehicle with Turkish soldiers on board was passing through the Serwan area in the Sirt district. They held the Kurdistan Labour Party responsible for this operation.
تعيش العائلات التركية المسلمة تحديات.
Muslim Turkish families face many challenges. Muslim families say that sometimes they witness violent attacks on anything that is Islamic. However, recently there have been major improvements, according to some Muslim families. Amir Lafi, our correspondent in Istanbul, sheds light on the situation of one of these families.
في ضيافة السيدة هدى سنحاول من خلال هذا اللقاء أن نسلط الضوء على بعض المشاكل التي
We have as a guest Ms. Huda. Through this interview, we will shed some light on some of the problems that face conservative Muslim families who live in the Republic of Turkey. Ms. Huda, welcome. First, let me ask you, what are the most important problems faced by religious conservative Muslims living in Turkey? By this, I mean the daily problems that you may experience in your life.
أعني بذلك المشاكل اليومية التي قد تصادفه في حياته.
بداية لابد من فصل الفترة ما بين عام 97 وعام 2000.
First, we must isolate the period between 1997 to 2000, or what is known as the years after February 28th, or the white coup of the Rafah government. That period was very hard. The situation got so bad that government hospitals refused to accept Muslim women patients wearing the hijab or headscarf, even if her health condition was critical. For example, I was arrested and was sentenced during this time because supposedly I would not remain quiet about the banning of the hijab. Today, the situation has generally improved. However, young girls who wear the hijab are denied education. The official authorities continue to reject any personal photos of a woman in hijab. For example, if she wants to obtain a passport or a driver's license.
طلب للحصول على جواز السفر أو رخصة القيادة مثلا.
Miss Norai, allow me to ask you a question. You were expelled from the university in 1999. How did this happen? What did you do afterwards?
1998 yılında İstanbul Üniversitesi. كان قد بقي أسبوعان.
2 weeks were left before graduation when a law was passed banning the hijab. They prohibited me from taking my final exams. They ordered me out of the classroom. When I refused to leave, they called the police, who made me sign a pledge stating that I would not return to the university or participate in the demonstrations. After a number of days, I was arrested in a demonstration whilst protesting against the ban on the hijab. That day, they treated me very harshly. I was subjected to severe beatings despite the fact that I told them I was pregnant. I lost my baby and spent that night in the hospital after my health condition deteriorated. After that, a number of legal charges were made against me. The rest of my family was threatened every day with investigations and random searches. I also used to receive death threats if I did not stop what they described as incitement. Then, my husband and I decided to emigrate to Canada, where we applied for refugee status and obtained Canadian citizenship. While there, I finished my university studies. A few months ago, I returned to Turkey. The situation now is better than before. I want my children to be raised amongst their relatives.
الوضع حاليا أصبح أفضل من قبل وأريد لأبنائي أن يتربوا بين أهلهم.
Mr. Kalusi, I want to ask you about why you were discharged from the army. As I understand, you were a soldier in the Turkish army. What exactly happened? What are you doing now?
I graduated from college at the top of my class. I obtained many awards during the 20 years of my service in the army. I even became a professor at the military college. Then, I received a letter from the Higher Military Advisor Council informing me that I had been discharged from the service for not following military laws. I requested to be told the reasons for the discharge. However, my request was rejected. The real reason why I was expelled is because I used to pray at the small mosque on the military base, and also because my wife wears hijab. Then many of my colleagues and I established an association for soldiers who were discharged from the army. Through this association, we seek to get a clearer picture about what has happened. We are trying to regain our rights.
Miss Intisar, it is known that Turkey has taken major steps to promote democracy and human rights in the past few years. You were arrested in 1999 and in 2003. First, why were you detained? Was there a difference in the way you were treated in these two instances?
اعتقالي في المرتين كان بسبب أحداث عام.
The two arrests were based on events that took place in 1999. I was sentenced to 7 months in jail because I read verses from the Quran at one of the demonstrations. These verses were seen as accusing the government of oppression. In another case, the persecutor requested the death penalty because I continued to participate in demonstrations. However, the judge sentenced me to 15 years in jail. Afterwards, I benefited from the reforms and changes in the law. In 2003, my case was retried and my sentence was reduced to only 1 year. The situation now is much better. However, we still live in a Muslim country that bans women in hijab from entering the university. These women are forced to leave the country to pursue higher studies. I ask God to end this situation.
With this prayer, Miss Intisar ended her story about her experiences of being arrested. And here ends a chapter in the story of a conservative Muslim family who lives under the rule of a secular government in Turkey.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. Please visit linktv.org/mosaic For more information about these broadcasters, or to view previous Mosaic programs, obtain program transcripts, or receive the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report, Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, and by committed Link TV viewers like you. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.